I want to talk to you in this podcast about something called stages of faith. It's related to the issue of spirituality, and it's a little difficult, a little complicated, so stay with me. There are stages in human spiritual development. Now, we know that there are stages in human physical development. It doesn't take a scientist to know that babies develop and become children, and children go through puberty and become teenagers and adolescents grow up and mature and change physically and become adults and so on. But it was not so obvious that there were also stages in human psychological development. It took people like Jean Piaget, Erik Erikson, and Lawrence Kohlberg to expound these stages in human psychological development and help us understand that people are at different places psychologically, and that it's unreasonable to expect people who are at a certain psychological place to be able to process information or perform various mental functions in the same way as someone who is at a higher level of psychological development. Well, in the same way, there has been study given to the stages of human spiritual development. And the primary source here is the work in Stages of Faith by James W. Fowler, whose book Stages of Faith is the primary source material, the primary research material for this idea. I'm going to go, however, a little different direction with a psychotherapist who is an MD, a psychiatrist named M. Scott Peck, who wrote a book called The Different Drum and dedicated a chapter of that book to patterns of transformation. And he starts it out by saying this, and I quote, "Over the course of a decade of practicing psychotherapy, a strange pattern began to emerge. If people who were religious came to me in pain and trouble, and if they became engaged in the therapeutic process so as to go the whole route, they frequently left therapy as atheists, agnostics, or at least skeptics. And then he says, on the other hand, if atheists, agnostics, or skeptics came to me in pain or difficulty and became fully engaged, they frequently left therapy as deeply religious people." So he concluded from this that not everybody's in the same place, and that spiritually people grow from one stage to another as they get a handle on some of the issues in their life. He makes the statement on page 188 of his book, "There is a pattern of progression through identifiable stages in human spiritual life." Peck describes these stages as 4. Fowler describes them as 6. Other people have more or less. But in this case, we'll go with Peck. Stage 1 he describes as chaotic, antisocial. Stage 2 as formal, institutional. Stage 3 as skeptic, individual, and Stage 4 as mystic, communal. Let's unpack each of these stages in a little more detail. Stage 1. Peck says this is characteristic of young children. In fact, it's normal for young children to be in Stage 1. It is not, however, normal for adults to be there, but perhaps 1 in 5 adults, by his estimate, are in Stage 1. He calls this the stage of undeveloped spirituality. He labels it antisocial because adults who are in this stage are generally incapable of loving others. They are, like young children, very egocentric, and relationships are all about what they can get out of them and tend to be self-serving. Hence the word antisocial. He also labels the stage chaotic because adults who are in this stage are basically unprincipled. They have no principles by which they live their lives, and so, as you might expect, they generally get into trouble. Now, with children, we parents teach them principles by which to live their lives, but these 1 in 5 adults who are in Stage 1 never picked up these principles, and so they don't know how to live, they don't know how to get along, they don't know how to function. And so, predictably, they usually get into trouble. They get into trouble with the law, they get into trouble with drugs, with alcohol, they can't hold a job. If they really face up to the reality of their lives, this can be an extremely painful moment of self-discovery for them. But it can also lead them to growth from stage 1 to stage 2. And this growth is often extremely traumatic. It takes the form of a sudden and dramatic conversion for many people. When they move on to stage 2, they are in an entirely different place spiritually. Now, Peck says this is the normal latency period for children, and children in stage 2 are doing just what they ought to do. But he also says that most adult churchgoers are in stage 2. He calls this stage formal, in that people in this stage love forms. They love rituals, they love liturgy, they love rules. Maybe you've come into contact with some of these people in church who, if the minister changes the order of service, are all bent out of shape. If anything changes in the church, they have a really hard time handling it, because church is their stability. Church is their rock. Church provides order for them. They want rules. They want rituals. They need that kind of stability. Now, some of these adults actually find this kind of stability in other kinds of institutions, but institutions they must have. For some, the institution will be a jail, and they will be model prisoners in jail, and they might get released for good behavior. And within 2 weeks, they've committed a whole host of crimes and find themselves right back in jail, where once again they're model prisoners, because the jail provides the kind of formal structures that they need. Some of these people will do well in the military, where the military will tell them what to do and when to get up and how to brush their teeth and how to make their bed. But for most people, they will find the forms that they need, the rituals and the liturgies and the rules that they need in the church. Now, in the church, they will tend to value rules and regulations and keeping things the same. Their view of God will almost always be that God is transcendent, far away, external. They will tend to see God as the cop in the sky who will get you and give you a ticket if you don't keep the rules. But once again, as they grow and as they develop, they can come to the place where they begin to see that there's more to life than living according to all of these rules and having external realities control them from day to day. And so they may move on from stage 2 to stage 3. Now, stage 2 people make wonderful citizens. They make great parents. They do really well in society. They love order. They keep the laws. They do really well with their children. And if they do really well with their children, then the children tend to internalize what the parents are teaching them, and then the children, if not the parents, are ready to go on to stage 3. And this is especially traumatic for their parents. Stage 3, Peck labels the stage of the skeptic. This is where people become atheists and agnostics. These people often become scientists who are dedicated to discovering the truth. And one of the things that they do is to question everything, and including the religion that they got from their parents. These skeptics, in a sense, throw out all the furniture that their parents furnished their house with. Figuratively speaking, of course. They throw it all out on the front lawn and throw out everything they were taught, everything that they learned from their parents, and then they look at it all and decide what they're going to take back into their own house. They tend to be individuals, not because they don't value relationships, but because they know who they are and they don't need other people telling them what to think or what to do. This stage is very difficult for people who love them and care about them who are still in stage 2, because they see these kids as leaving the faith and going astray and losing their way. And once again, moving from stage 3 to stage 4 can be a very traumatic experience. Stage 4 people, Peck describes as mystics. This is a really hard term to define. Mystics tend to see the connections between things. They tend to see that life is a great mystery, and they're comfortable with the mystery. In fact, they love mystery. They tend to see that somehow things are related at a deeper level, that people are related at a deeper level, and so Peck calls them communal. That is to say that they understand the relationships between all the peoples of the earth at a deeper level. These people tend to see Christianity as relationships rather than rules. They tend to see religion not as a set of rules to be followed, but something that optimizes the opportunity for relationships between people and God, and between people and people, and God and people. They see the Bible specifically as more of a love story than a law code. They read the Bible not so much to find out what they should do, but to find out about this wonderful God that stands behind it, and how they can enter into a deeper and more real relationship with Him. They talk a lot about love relationships, about trust, about knowing God as opposed to simply knowing about God. And these stage 4 people, in a sense, have reached the point where they really are ready to have a healthy spirituality. Growth from stage to stage is painful. It's very traumatic. And one of the reasons it is because people in one stage tend to try to hold on to people in that stage and not let them move on. For example, parents try to hold their children in stage 2. And when their children try to move on to stage 3, the parents resist. They get the minister to talk to them. They get the priest to tell them that they'll go to hell if they leave the church or if they don't believe the things that they've been taught to believe. Stage 2 people are not much threatened by stage 1 people. They simply see them as sinners. But they are threatened by stage 3 people because they see them as skeptics who are challenging everything and questioning everything. And this is dangerous because it upsets things for stage 2 people and makes them feel very uncomfortable. Stage 3 people, on the other hand, look at stage 2 people and wonder how they could be so superstitious, how they can believe all the things that the religious authorities have taught them, how they can just be content with following rules and regulations and doing the same stuff the same way year after year after year. Stage 3 people, however, are very threatened by stage 4 people because they just don't understand how these stage 4 people who are so smart and who are so good and who are quite scientific and who write such good papers with such great footnotes can believe the things that they believe. They can actually believe in Christianity. They actually believe in God, and they read the Bible, and they go to church. They just don't get it because these stage 3 skeptics don't understand how these stage 4 people can possibly see any reality in all that religion stuff. Stage 4 people understand stage 3 people. They understand that they're simply stuck where they are, and they hope and pray that they will grow to the place where they will see the relational side of religion and understand that religion is not just about rules and regulations, but it is about knowing God and experiencing God and loving God and being in relationship with God. Peck says, and I fully agree, that all the great religions, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, have the ability to speak to people in both stage 2 and stage 4. In other words, people who are looking for religion to provide structures and forms and rules, and also speak to people who are looking to that religion to help them to know God and experience God, and to enter into a deep relationship of love with God. Conversions from one stage to the next are very interesting to look at. From stage 1 to stage 2, conversions tend to be sudden and dramatic. This is the drunkard who has the experience of being suddenly converted, of meeting Jesus, and of totally being transformed and never touching a bottle again and becoming a model citizen, and tends to join a fairly conservative, even fundamentalist church. He needs that kind of structure, and that kind of church provides it for him. Conversion from stage 3 to stage 4 tends to be more gradual and more gentle. The skeptic looks and thinks and wonders about the things that stage 4 people are telling him that he has trouble believing, but he'd like to because they have such peace and such confidence, and they seem to be so wise, and he longs to have that kind of thing because his skepticism has left him empty. But gradually, over a period of time, gently, as the Spirit woos him, he comes to the place where he begins to discover that there is a different kind of God than the kind that his parents or his priest or his rabbi or his pastor taught him about. A God of love and a God of grace, a God that it's more important to know than to know about. Now, interestingly enough, there's also a kind of conversion that happens from stage 2 to stage 3. And this one's very hard for parents in the church to allow. This is the place where the rule-keeping, religious kid becomes a skeptic. Parents try to prevent it. The church says it's bad. But in reality, it's a very good thing, because the only way that you can grow is to go through that skeptical wilderness. The only way that you can come to the place where you know God and experience God and love God is to move to the place where you question everything. So what really needs to happen is that parents and pastors need to encourage people to doubt, but that's a very hard thing to allow. Now, as we think about people who are going through health crises, people who are ill, we have to realize that people are in all these different stages. And we have to understand that just because we're in one stage doesn't mean that they are. And we've got to try and adapt our spiritual conversation to the place where these people are. If we can do that, then we will be able to communicate to people across all these stages. And we ourselves will be able to move from one stage to the next and to grow and become more and more firmly alive in those higher stages of spiritual development.